Among prehistoric sharks, none are more famous than the giant Megalodon, a fearsome predator that stalked the ancient oceans for almost 20 million years. This enormous shark was a ruthless killer of extinct whales and other marine animals, feeding on almost anything it could get its jaws around. Surely nothing in our planet's oceans could ever have competed with such an extraordinary creature. Well, this is the fossil record that we're talking about, so of course something extraordinary and unexpected was bound to turn up, something that could even have rivaled Megalodon itself. Another giant prehistoric killer of large-bodied marine prey was announced in 2010, a huge macroraptorial sperm whale called Leviathan. This animal lived from about 10 to 5 million years ago, towards the latter part of Megalodon's reign, and has been found in the very same locations that the giant shark lived in. The diets of these two animals seem to have overlapped as well, and so with two massive predators living in the same areas and eating the same things, it appears to have been inevitable that these giants of prehistory would have clashed at some point or another. The rivalry between Megalodon and Leviathan seems almost too spectacular, too much like some over-the-top B-movie to be true, and yet this competition was a very real thing and something that's been written about in several scientific papers on these animals. It's also a very enticing topic for a video, so what better way to close out Shark Week 2023 than to look at Megalodon and its nemesis, Leviathan. The feeding ecology of Megalodon, technically called Otodus megalodon, has been extensively studied, with much fossil evidence contributing to our understanding of what this fish ate. These fossil finds include bones from both large and small-bodied prehistoric whales that display bite marks and traces thought to have been inflicted by Megalodon teeth, as well as such marks on bones belonging to seals, sea lions, turtles, and manatees. One vertebra from a large whale found in the Caribbean even preserves a Megalodon tooth embedded in it, showing with certainty that the big fishy of death was certainly capable of tackling large whales, but it wasn't restricted to hunting only these animals and was just as happy to feed on whatever was available. A great deal of isotopic evidence from the fossils has been investigated too. By looking at various different isotope compositions of the teeth from this shark, paleontologists have been able to tell a lot about Megalodon's diet and its position within these prehistoric ocean food webs. Calcium isotopes have been used to show that Megalodon occupied a slightly higher trophic position than modern-day great white sharks, meaning they were higher up on the food chain and were able to feed on other large predators that great whites cannot. However, this contrasts slightly with other evidence from zinc isotopes showing that towards the end of Megalodon's time, there was actually quite a lot of overlap in the trophic level of this shark and great whites, with both species actually feeding on animals lower down in the food web such as small filter-feeding cetaceans. Yet another isotope analysis has been used to show that Megalodon was quite a generalist though, this time looking at nitrogen isotope compositions. This research found that there was a large spread of nitrogen isotope values among samples of Megalodon teeth, with some showing extremely high values, higher than any other marine predator in fact, while others had quite low values, implying that these sharks fed on a wide variety of prey items. This further supports the fossil evidence mentioned earlier, showing that Megalodon could feed on whatever it wanted. But what about Leviathan? Well, from the moment this giant was described, it was clear to paleontologists that it was also a predator of large marine animals. Unlike modern sperm whales, to which Leviathan is only distantly related, this prehistoric killer had massive teeth in both the upper and lower jaws, whereas modern sperm whales only have teeth on the lower jaw. This points towards a very different feeding strategy between the whales, and whereas modern sperm whales obtain prey through suction feeding, Leviathan most likely fed more like an orca, taking big chunks of flesh out of the unfortunate creatures it targeted. The fossil evidence we have for Leviathan's existence is actually fairly limited, with just the holotype partial skull and several isolated teeth from around the world being referred to this cetacean. For over 100 years, exceptionally large teeth that appeared similar in structure to a sperm whale's were occasionally being found at various fossil localities, but the creature these teeth were coming from remained unknown to science, as no known whale matched the enormous size of the dentition. Then, while on a field trip to an exposure of the Miocene-aged Pisco Formation of Peru in November 2008, paleontologists uncovered the magnificent 3-meter-long skull of a macroraptorial sperm whale preserved with these same terrifying giant teeth. At last, the culprit had been found. The paleontologists published their discovery in July of 2010, naming it Leviathan melvillei, after both the biblical sea creature as well as Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick. Unfortunately, it turned out that the name Leviathan couldn't be used for this animal as it was preoccupied, since it had been used as an alternate name for the mastodon back in 1841. Although it's now an invalid genus name, this still means that the name Leviathan can't ever be used as a scientific name for an animal, which is quite a shame. Anyway, in response, the authors published a correction in August of 2010, changing the name to Leviathan, the original Hebrew word for Leviathan. Leviathan was a very interesting and unique animal. As I already mentioned, when looking at its evolutionary relationships among the sperm whale superfamily, called Physeteroidea, it was found to belong to an entirely separate lineage from the one containing the modern sperm whale, and also in a separate position from the living dwarf and pygmy sperm whales, the Kogiids. Leviathan also falls into a distinct lineage by itself even when compared to the other known macroraptorial sperm whales, such as Acrophyseter, Brygmophyseter, and Zygophyseter. Albicetus, meaning white whale, again in reference to Moby Dick, was named in 2015 and found to be somewhat closely allied with Leviathan though, but the exact relationship is still unclear. Leviathan differs from some of these other raptorial physeteroids in that the supracranial basin, the distinct bowl-shaped depression on the top surface of the skull that would have housed the spermaceti organ, actually extends all the way along to the front of the upper jaws, like in the modern sperm whale. In Acrophyseter and Zygophyseter though, the supracranial basin is more restricted, and a protruding snout would have been present in life as the spermaceti organ didn't reach as far forward. The skull of Leviathan was found in rocks dating to between 11.6 and 9 million years ago, but teeth matching this whale or being very similar to it have been found in rocks ranging just up to 5 million years ago. And not only did this whale cross over in time with Megalodon, which lived from about 23 to 3.6 million years ago, but they crossed over geographically too. Like Megalodon, Leviathan seems to have had a global distribution, with teeth being recovered in Chile, Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and even California. The locality in Peru from which the skull was recovered has also produced teeth belonging to Megalodon, with the authors who initially described Leviathan suggesting that the combination of these two enormous predators in the same environment must have had a major impact on the composition of marine food webs. In fact, one such impact of the presence of Megalodon and Leviathan was found within a population of physeteroids known from fossils in North Carolina. A 2018 study looked at a large sample of sperm whale teeth from the US Atlantic coastal plain that date to around 5 million years ago and found something very interesting. The teeth that they sampled all belonged to raptorial sperm whales, and though they couldn't be classified exactly, the presence of wear facets on the teeth indicated that these whales all had teeth in both upper and lower jaws, so they were different to the modern sperm whale and likely had a comparable ecology to orcas. These particular physeteroids were also all about the same size as an orca, reaching 8 to 10 meters in length, and by looking at growth layers within the teeth, the researchers were able to determine at what age these whales had died. Somewhat surprisingly, they found that these sperm whales only rarely lived more than 20 years, whereas modern sperm whales and orcas regularly live for more than 65 years. So it seems these fossil sperm whales had an accelerated life history, growing fast and not living very long, which the authors attribute to the intense predation pressure inflicted on these cetaceans by superpredators such as Megalodon and Leviathan. Whereas in modern oceans, killer whales sit at the top of the food web and can enjoy long lifespans since nothing else really threatens them, back in the Neogene, things were very different. Orca-sized raptorial sperm whales were not the top predators of their time, and so they were forced to grow fast in order to survive. These prehistoric oceans must therefore have had some unique properties in order to support so many large macropredators in coastal environments. Primary production rates must have been significantly higher in certain coastal regions than they are today, and it appears there were a few extra steps in these ocean food webs that added a complexity to the system that is not seen in the modern world. So clearly the presence of two superpredators in the Neogene oceans was having trickle-down effects on other organisms. But what about on the superpredators themselves? Well, as we've seen, the oceans were capable of supporting both species, with those extra tiers in the food webs and highly productive primary producers enabling the evolution of such enormous carnivores. But Megalodon and Leviathan were still likely going after the same prey. Although Megalodon seems to have been fairly generalist, the evidence shows that it would have hunted baleen whales, the mysticetes, and these are also thought to have been the favoured prey of Leviathan. So it's entirely possible that, just as the countless videos on the subject like to talk about, myself included, Megalodon and Leviathan may have fought each other. Of course, like any animal competing over a source of food, conflict with another dangerous predator would most likely have been avoided until no other course of action was possible, and physical attacks would be a last resort. Still, towards the end of Leviathan's temporal range, perhaps conflicts with other large predators such as Megalodon would have been intensified as the medium-sized mysticetes favoured as prey by the sperm whales became rarer and eventually disappeared, and larger baleen whales evolved. In the paper describing Leviathan, it's proposed that the whale would have specifically targeted these smaller mysticetes, since they had the high energy content needed to sustain such a large endothermic predator within their thick layers of blubber. Plus, the abundance and diversity of these mysticetes in the same formation as Leviathan makes them logical prey. Interestingly, a very recent paper from June of 2023 has found that Megalodon 2 had intensive energy demands, as it turns out to have also been endothermic, maintaining an internal body temperature that was higher than the surrounding environmental temperature. Megalodon likely had a different kind of endothermy to cetaceans though, known as regional endothermy, in which only certain parts of the body were kept warm. Still, it seems reasonable to assume that this giant, regionally endothermic shark would also have required calorific prey such as mysticetes in order to maintain itself. Another reason for potential conflict with Leviathan. More very cool direct evidence for conflicts between prehistoric sperm whales and large sharks has also been found, as described in a 2021 paper. A single tooth from a physeteroid was found in North Carolina that displays something very interesting. The tooth has 3 gouges across its surface, and based on the traces of a serrated tooth edge, the size of the bites, and the spacing between them, they could only have been inflicted by a member of the Otodus genus. Now, this may have been Otodus megalodon itself, or it could have been Otodus chubutensis, a close relative of Megalodon that was still pretty large, as both of these species have been found in the same formation this tooth comes from. Based on the size of the physeteroid tooth, it's estimated that the animal this came from was around 4 meters in total length, so nothing like the size of Leviathan, which has been estimated at between about 14 to over 17 meters long. There's also no way to know for sure if the bite marks made by the shark were the result of an active predation attempt, or if they were from a shark scavenging on the whale's carcass. However, the paleontologists favour the active predation explanation, as the shark was clearly targeting the jaws of this cetacean if it then left marks on the teeth, and biting the jaws would make more sense if an attacker was trying to disable live prey, rather than scavenging on this part of the body that has relatively little flesh on it compared to other regions. Another thing to note here is that the gouge labelled 3 on the tooth is on a part that would have been embedded in the jaw of the living whale. So when this shark bit down on the cetacean, it would have had to first break through the jawbone to inflict this mark, showing how powerfully these sharks could bite. Although it's not a tooth from Leviathan, and it's not definitely a bite from Megalodon itself, it nevertheless shows that sharks of the Otodus genus would sometimes have targeted physeteroids too, and that opens up the possibility of sharks such as Megalodon going after even larger ones. So those Neogene oceans were undoubtedly a terrifying place, with not just one, but at least 2 massive superpredators ruling those prehistoric waves. The presence of these carnivores has also taught paleontologists a great deal about the structure of prehistoric marine food webs, and it's very interesting to consider that the arrangement back then would have been quite different to our modern oceans, with a few extra tiers to consider. And yes, it's just plain cool to think that Megalodon and Leviathan may have fought over the same prey. And what a fight that would have been. There's a lot more I could say about Leviathan too, especially in regards to what it means for sperm whale evolution, so do let me know if you'd like to see a video just on that. And so that marks the end of Shark Week 2023. I really hope you've enjoyed the videos this year, and let me know in the comments your suggestions for topics for Shark Week 2024. Also be sure to head on over to my mum's channel, One World, to watch her Shark Week video on sharks in captivity. Anyway, thank you for watching, and a big thank you to our Patreon supporters, especially our Dinosaur tier supporters, Amanda von Nordek, Archianthus, Clara Middleton, Daniel Ingraham, Dhruv Shrivastava, Gary Arrington, Geortist, Greg Silvernail, Corey Peterson, Loxypoo, Mark Nevin, Mendicant Fryer, Mike Pace, Monitor Man, Persian Boy, Ralph Balzac, Robert Thomas, and Steve Bradshaw. If you would like to find out more about our world, its history, and the wonderful life that surrounds us all, please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you think we deserve it, and if you would like to see more from us.